Headliner Nation, if there was one rule that I could help reinforce to you before you draft this season, it would be keep in mind that we don't hate players. We hate their ADP. So entering 2023 redraft leagues, what players are most likely to bust given their current ADP? Let's jump into that right now. Headliner Nation, the same thing every single season. What players do we hate given their ADP? But remember, just because I don't like a guy in, let's say, the 3rd round, doesn't mean I wouldn't take a shot at him in like the 6th round. So I'm gonna go through 16 rounds of ADP with you right now. I'm gonna pick out players in each round that I think are most likely to bust given their ADP, and then I'll give you a couple of options that I would rather draft in that same round instead. Yo, hit that like button for me, subscribe if you're new here to the channel, buckle up, and let's get ready for this ride. Based on the current ADP, round 1 is pretty cut and dry for me. Now, once again, if you're drafting at the top of the 1st round, going with a guy like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, or even Tyreek Hill in those first few picks is absolutely okay if you would rather have a wide receiver this year. But it's still hard for me to believe that Jonathan Taylor's ADP is currently in the 1st round. And I'm not saying that I'm completely off Jonathan Taylor. I'm just not using my 1st round pick on him right now, given what's going on down in Indy. Now, the closer we get to week 1 and the longer it takes to resolve things with Jonathan Taylor, the cheaper you're going to get him on draft day. So let's say you get him like in the 3rd round in the next couple of weeks. You know what? I'm okay with that because you probably already drafted your RB1. But honestly, my favorite player to draft in the 1st round, given this current ADP, is going to be Nick Chubb. The dude really is in for what could be a tremendous season. And honestly, his season could be so big that people could be looking at him as the next 1.01 come next draft season. He's always gotten the workload on the ground. He's always had uber efficiency along with it as well. Now, if we can just lock in, let's say 13 touchdowns and get him like 50 targets in the passing game, heck, we could be looking at an RB1 overall season. And I'm sure someone's going to comment and ask about Bijan Robinson as well. And I'll just reiterate the same thing I've said all off season. Right now, I would just rather take a guy that I've seen do it before instead of just crossing my fingers and hoping that everything works out with Bijan in Atlanta. He's going to have a great season. I know that, but I still don't know how much Tyler Algier is going to get into the game plan still. And I also don't know how much realistic passing work he's going to get given the options around him. And real quick, this video is going to be a little bit more quick hitting than deep diving, but if you want some really deep diving analytics and breakdowns, you're going to want to get our draft guide. It's only $21.99 right now. The link to the fantasyheadliners.com is in the description of this video. There's almost 300 exclusive videos in our draft guide that we aren't putting here on YouTube. There's also exclusive content like my dynamic running back rating that you can't find on any other fantasy platform in the industry. So even if your draft is not for another couple of weeks, you're gonna wanna get it now and you're gonna wanna start studying because you will not wanna miss out on the information that is in this draft guide. As we head into round 2, I've already mentioned taking a wide receiver early this season is absolutely fine with me. My preferred start to any draft this season has either been wide receiver, running back, or running back, wide receiver, running back. And in the 2nd round, we have 2 amazing choices that were actually must-haves for me just a couple of weeks ago in one of my videos. But first, the guys that I don't like in this round are Tony Pollard and Davante Adams. And Davante Adams has an in-depth breakdown in our draft guide talking about exactly why I am so worried about him this season. Listen, Davante Adams is a fantastic wide receiver, but so much of his value last season was built on the deep ball with Derek Carr. And even in years past, he was the go-to guy down the field for Aaron Rodgers. Well, Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers can go down the field pretty well. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL at throwing the ball deep. Tony Pollard, for me, is all about the injury from last season. Taking him in the 2nd round right now is a little spicy. I would much rather get him in the 3rd round when I could take him as my RB2 after I already have another running back on my roster. And I love Tony Pollard. I called him as a breakout in my dynamic running back section of the draft guide last year, but I'm just worried about the comeback from the injury. Can he take on a full workload to begin the season? Is Dallas going to want to even give him a full workload throughout the season? Again, give him to me one round later and I'm all on board, but round 2 is a little too spicy for me right now. But I already mentioned it with CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown. Those are the 2 guys in round 2 that I want to hammer the draft button on every single time. And again, I did a must-have video a couple of weeks ago about these guys. You're going to want to check that out if you have any issues trying to draft them. In round 3, Breece Hall and Devontae Smith are the 2 that I have to be out on right now. And obviously, Breece Hall is all about his injury. And is Dalvin Cook going to sign, or what is going on over there? If Breece Hall hadn't gotten hurt last year, he would probably be the #1 overall pick in fantasy drafts this season. But he's working his way back from a significant injury. Dalvin Cook keeps lurking around New York, and we don't really know what Breece Hall is going to look like to start the year. Now, if they don't sign Dalvin Cook, he could end up getting a lot better as the season goes on. So he actually could end up hitting that ADP for you. But since we don't know what's happening with Dalvin Cook still at this point, I just can't do it in the 3rd round. And for Devontae Smith, I broke down last season in that must-have video that I mentioned a minute ago for AJ Brown, because everybody keeps looking at what Devontae Smith did to end the season and not what he did at the beginning of the year. Because at the start of 2022, he was barely a wide receiver 2 most weeks, with Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown healthy. It wasn't until the end of the season when Dallas Goedert went down with his injury and then tried to come back but wasn't fully 100% that he really broke out. And also, I need to remind everybody that his 2 best games of the season, where a majority of his fantasy points were scored, were not with Jalen Hurts. They were with Gardner Minshew when Hurts was out. That's a pretty significant point that I think a lot of people forget when they're drafting Devontae Smith this season. So in round 3, I would rather go with Ramondre Stevenson or Kenneth Walker. Stevenson could be in for an absolutely huge season, maybe one that we haven't seen from a New England running back in quite some time. And everybody keeps talking about, well, they're concerned because Bill Belichick likes to go with like a committee approach. That's just not going to happen this season. Are other guys going to get touches? Absolutely, but who doesn't in today's NFL? But Ramondre Stevenson is an absolute lock inside the top 12 running backs if he stays healthy all year. And you know what? Given his ability to make things happen on the ground and his efficiency potential, this is a guy that I have with an upside of top 5 running backs. Kenneth Walker is still banged up. The groin is not feeling great right now, but we still have like 4 weeks until kickoff of week 1. He's got plenty of time to rest up. I'm not worried about it right now. And speaking of being worried about things, I'm not worried about Zach Charbonnet either. Zach Charbonnet is a good player. I don't mind him at all. And honestly, I really wish that he would have went somewhere else and not fallen in Seattle. And while he's going to get touches this season, it's not going to be enough to keep Kenneth Walker outside the top 12 running backs. So here in this round, if you've already drafted a running back and you add Kenneth Walker and his potential upside every single week as your RB2, that is a great start to your draft. As we head into round 4, Deebo Samuel and Justin Fields are the 2 that I'm most concerned about, which honestly is tough for me to say because I like both of them. I just don't like either of them in round 4. Listen, Deebo thrives in the intermediate portion of the field, but if Brock Purdy is the starter, which looks more than like at this point, it's tough to see that happening because he loves George Kittle in the intermediate part of the field. And speaking of George Kittle, he's going to come up next round. So Brandon Ayuk's got the deep portion of the field covered. George Kittle's in the intermediate part of the field. And you've got Christian McCaffrey, obviously, is the lead running back. So really, it comes down to Deebo Samuel and how much efficiency he can have because the volume is absolutely going to take a hit. So he's going to need to offset that with some crazy efficiency that might be tough to live up to. And if you're looking for upside, honestly, I believe the upside is a lot better with Brandon Ayuk than it is with Deebo. Now listen, my issue with Justin Fields isn't actually Justin Fields itself. It's just the fact that I could get a guy that I like a lot more this season in Trevor Lawrence later in the draft. And Trevor Lawrence will come up next round as well. Justin Fields, the upside is absolutely tremendous with what he does on the ground. And I absolutely love the connection that's forming between him and DJ Moore. But if I'm going to use a 5th round pick on a quarterback, I'm going to go with a guy that I feel like I can trust his floor a little bit more every single week. And adding rushing numbers to a quarterback doesn't really help their floor. It helps their ceiling, but it's going to be Justin Fields developing as a passer that would truly help his floor this year. And I would rather just take that bet on Trevor Lawrence a round later, because depending on how your draft started out, round 4 is the area where we're starting to get out of the running backs that I like this season. And Aaron Jones and Dameon Pierce are 2 of those guys that I would love to have on my team. Dameon Pierce has a significant section in the draft guide, and I don't want to give all of that away, but I really love him this season. For Aaron Jones, we've talked about that a lot as well. The change at the quarterback position and the lack of, let's say, established pass catchers in Green Bay, I think is really going to help Aaron Jones have a pretty big season. We know he's going to be utilized through the air. He's going to be used on the ground along with A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones as your RB2, or heck, even if through the first 4 rounds you're getting 3 running backs as your RB3, is absolutely perfect. Honestly, for those of you that are drafting Dalvin Cook in round 5, you're drafting him with the hopes that he lands in Miami. And we're just not hearing enough noise about him being in Miami for us to utilize that type of a pick on him. Listen, if he was going a few rounds later and you were taking a stab as like your RB5 to sit on your bench, that's one thing. But you're drafting Dalvin Cook in round 5, hoping he becomes a starter for you. I also, listen, are we really doing this with Kyle Pitts again this season? Now, I understand why people are so enamored by him, but to start training camp, he looks slow. Like, he doesn't look like the athletic guy that was drafted a couple of seasons ago. You've added Bijan Robinson. You're going to run the ball an awful lot. You've got Drake London on the other side. Cordero Patterson is still there. Are we really going to continue to invest in Kyle Pitts at this high of an ADP at the tight end position? There's just guys going after him that are just as risky. So why not take that risk a few rounds later? My favorite picks here are Trevor Lawrence and George Kittle, though. And I mentioned both of them when I talked about guys on their team in the round before. George Kittle absolutely is Brock Purdy's favorite target. The dude was the tight end 1 for a majority of the end of the season after Brock Purdy took over as the starter. And honestly, it would not surprise me if Trevor Lawrence finished top 3 in MVP voting this year. He's going to have a huge breakout season. I can feel it. This is honestly in round 5 the sweet spot for my quarterback position. This is where I want to go with Trevor Lawrence, and I want to do it as much as possible. And it really depends on what type of a draft you're in as well. In round 6, Alvin Kamara continues to kind of hold that top spot, but just after the announcement last week that his 3-game suspension is really all he has to deal with, I expect that ADP to rise very soon. The one guy in this round that I'm not loving is Rachaad White. And I was actually on board with Rachaad White at the beginning of the offseason. I thought he was a breakout candidate. But then I dived a little deeper. Rachaad White last season, efficiency-wise, was not good. In fact, he was one of the worst running backs in the NFL when you take a look at some key categories. And that was with Tom Brady as your quarterback. Now you're going to have either Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. That is very worrisome for me. Will the volume be there? Absolutely. He will be the starter. There's some guys right behind him vying for some touches, though. So if the efficiency isn't there and you're only relying on volume, Rachaad White is a guy that I just don't think is someone that you can rely on in your starting lineup every week. And the problem with Rachaad White is a lot of you RB0 truthers out there that want to go running back late, he's a poster boy for somebody that you're taking as your RB1 or RB2. That scares the heck out of me. Brandon Ayuk in round 6 is your wide receiver 2 or maybe even wide receiver 3, depending on how you started the draft, with high upside potential every single week. I kind of like that. I don't think he's going to be consistent for you, but what wide receivers in this area will be. With all of the weapons over the short and intermediate part of the field and the run game that San Francisco has, Brandon Ayuk is going to find himself in a lot of one-on-one matchups. He's going to have some huge weeks that that will win your week for you. But he's also going to have some duds that when you look at it, you're going to be like, I really shouldn't have played him this week. Man, I am really loving round 7 right now. But the two guys that I'm most concerned about are Evan Ingram and Deontay Johnson. Evan Ingram, he could still keep some of the same volume that he saw last season, but I don't think that he's going to be as trusted by Trevor Lawrence as what we saw at times either. Evan Ingram is a little bit more boom or bust for me, and if you're looking at some more consistency from the tight end position, a guy like Pat Freiermuth is going a little bit later, and he should still continue to be a big target for Kenny Pickett. And for Deontay Johnson, I know that this guy has gotten a ton of targets over the last few years, but I really firmly believe that George Pickens is going to overtake him as the wide receiver 1 in this offense in 2023. And would you look at that? George Pickens is one of my favorite picks in this round, along with James Cook, Christian Kirk, and Michael Pittman. George Pickens was actually one of the best deep ball wide receivers in all the NFL last season. And I've already mentioned this with a guy like Brandon Ayuk. George Pickens with one-on-one matchups down the field is absolutely going to smash those, and that's going to make for some easy targets for Kenny Pickett. Christian Kirk was already in one of my must-have wide receiver videos. I absolutely love him right here, especially if you're getting him as your wide receiver 3. If you're concerned about Calvin Ridley taking volume away from him, don't be, because it's not going to happen. Even if he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense, he could still easily see 130 targets. Michael Pittman is probably going to be the #1 target for Anthony Richardson all season long. And let me tell you right now, yes, you're worried about Anthony Richardson, but he's looking better and better in training camp. Everybody has already said that he's progressing with his accuracy, and Michael Pittman is the target leader potentially this year. I love that more than what they had last season. James Cook is becoming one of my favorite late round targets at the running back position. I think this guy is in line for a huge breakout this season, and I plan on doing more deep diving videos on him coming up. When we start to get to round 8, it's really hard to sit here and say, man, I really don't love somebody if they're given ADP, because these guys that we're talking about moving forward the rest of the way really are guys that you're drafting to be on your bench that maybe you could float in and out on any given week. You're not necessarily drafting starters at this point. But a guy like Jamal Williams, I just don't see the return on value. I think a lot of people are still drafting him, hoping he scores 17 rushing touchdowns again, and that just isn't going to happen. And the 3-game suspension for Alvin Kamara means Jamal Williams will be the guy at the beginning of the year, but he won't be for the entire season, because Alvin Kamara is going to come back. He's going to be the main running back in those pass catching options, and he's still going to cut in to Jamal Williams' work on the ground. Think of Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift from last season in Detroit. But instead, DeAndre Swift is Alvin Kamara, and Alvin Kamara plays a full schedule. And also, the coaching staff doesn't hate Alvin Kamara the way they hated DeAndre Swift. So honestly, in this round, I'd rather take a guy like Rashad Penny. It's going to be a shot in the dark, and I know a lot of you are going to be like, but Penny's always hurt, and I get that. But let's just say that Penny plays in, we'll say 14 games this season. If he plays in 14 games this season, I would be willing to make a bet that he finishes higher than DeAndre Swift in fantasy points. Because Rashad Penny, even through all the injuries, when he's on the field, continues to be one of the most efficient, high upside running backs in all of football. But his luck is running out, and his time is running out. It's either now or never behind this offensive line within this offense. If he can stay healthy, it's Rashad Penny breakout season. If he gets hurt once again, it really doesn't matter anyway. Now in round 9, I list Damien Harris as the guy that I least like in this round. And really it's because, again, I don't really want to draft Damien Harris in the hopes that he scores 10 rushing touchdowns. I would rather take James Cook in the round or 2 before him and actually utilize him as a starter every single week, because I do believe James Cook will outsnap and outtouch Damien Harris by a pretty decent margin this season. Damien Harris for me is a guy that you're drafting in leagues where you have maybe 14 teams or you have a couple of extra flex spots, and you put him in the weeks that you hope that he can score a touchdown. But volume-wise, I really don't think he's adding much this year. In fact, in this round, I'd rather take a stab at a guy like Khalil Herbert, which honestly, the see he's going this high in redraft leagues is a little shocking to me because people continue to kiss the backside of Roschon Johnson. But I think they're forgetting how good Khalil Herbert was last season when he started. And I broke that down in our draft guide as Khalil Herbert being a sleeper. But let me tell you, in the weeks that Khalil Herbert was given double-digit touches last season, he was at least an RB2 every single week. I know y'all hate Gabe Davis, and I know he left a lot of you hanging last year, but an early ankle injury really derailed what was a very promising start to the season, and then Josh Allen hurting his elbow affected the deep passing game a lot, which is where Gabe Davis would thrive. I'm going to give him another shot this year because his ADP, again, at this point, who cares? If you draft him and he doesn't work out again, you're going to find somebody to replace him. He's not going to kill you going in the 9th round. If you're looking for somebody a little bit safer, Odell Beckham Jr. in this round could end up being your guy. It's very foreseeable that he leads the Baltimore Ravens in targets this season. And given the fact that they're switching to a more pass-heavy option, that could end up leading to some decent games for Odell Beckham Jr., where if you start 3 wide receivers, he could be the perfect wide receiver 3 for you. People love Devon Achane, and it's not like I don't. But Achane is very undersized and likely will not stay at the running back position during his NFL career. More than likely, you're going to see a guy like Achane move out to the slot wide receiver role, or he's really going to be limited as a pass catcher only. And if you're limited as a pass catcher only, and we already know that we can lock in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as the 1 and 2, that kind of worries me for people who really want Achane to be a fantasy starter for them. As long as Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson are healthy, they're going to be the starter on the ground. Mostert almost ran for 1,000 yards last season. I don't think he's going to just be replaced automatically. I'm quite surprised that Elijah Moore is still available in round 10 right now. This guy is the perfect late round wide receiver. I absolutely love what Cleveland is trying to do with him right now. We just have to hope that they follow through and it actually works. But Moore has a chip on his shoulder. And if he ends up becoming even the number 2 target for Deshaun Watson, that's going to bring fantasy viable weeks for you in your lineup. Now, I still believe Amari Cooper will lead the team in targets this season, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the efficiency that Elijah Moore gives you wouldn't offer you a little bit more, no pun intended, upside. I'm just going to use round 11 to remind everybody that I do not and will not support taking a defense this early, even if it's as good as the San Francisco 49ers. Every season, there's a couple of defenses that are either undrafted or taken in the last couple of rounds that end up giving you more than enough fantasy points. I'm going to take a shot at those defenses every single week. In round 11, I would still rather shoot for guys that could offer me some upside and potentially become fantasy starters for me. Honestly, in round 11, there aren't a ton of guys that I look at this ADP and say, man, I love that guy. I'm going to throw Cole Kmet out though, because at this point, if you're still looking for a tight end, you're looking for guys that have touchdown upside. And even though Cole Kmet's not going to give you a ton of volume, we know that Justin Fields loves looking his way when they get closer to the red zone. And if that happens, who knows? 10 touchdowns absolutely in the foreseeable future for Cole Kmet. If that happens, he's a guy that you could float in and out of your tight end position, given good matchups. If you want to use your last pick on Zeke, go for it. That's fine. But honestly, tell me in the comments below, where do you think Zeke goes where he actually becomes a guy that he contributes consistently? The best case scenario is if Zeke were to re-sign with Dallas. If that happens, maybe he's like an RB3. But listen, we're not going to play that waiting game right now. And seeing as how Raheem Mostert, who I've already talked about this video and in my Deep Sleepers video from the other day, and a bunch of other times I feel like in videos, he's going right where Zeke is going. Take a stab on Mostert instead. You could also take a stab at the potential wide receiver 1 in Kansas City in this round with Sky Moore. And if he is the wide receiver 1, round 12 is going to be quite the bargain for you with him. People have got to pump the brakes on Sam Laporta and Tank Bigsby. It's getting a little out of hand at this point. Do I like Sam Laporta? Absolutely. Do I like the Detroit Lions? Clearly. They're my team. And I love that they added him. But rookie tight ends never do anything. In fact, there's only been 3 over the last, decade that have absolutely been guys that were top 12 options. Other than that, everyone else is not fantasy viable. Laporta's going to score some touchdowns, but in terms of volume and target, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. You've re-signed Marvin Jones to come back to Detroit. Jamison Williams will be there after week 6. You have David Montgomery in the running game, and you have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to be in the running game and the pass game. And, oh, by the way, you spin a first-round pick on him. There's going to be target spread all over the place. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of my concerns about Detroit is that it's going to be hard to figure out who's the guy on a weekly basis. If you want to take Sam Laporta in best ball, all for it. That's fine. In redraft leagues like we're talking about right now, just skip. Just stop it. Don't try it. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, Tank Bigsby is not taking over for Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne was way too good last season. The one knock on Travis Etienne is he wasn't great in the red zone as a runner. And that makes a little bit of sense because that's not his strength anyway. So if we see Tank Bigsby come in and get some of those touches, absolutely, it will happen. And that's one of the reasons why that Travis Etienne is more like a low-end RB1 for me, and I'm not going much higher than that. I am telling you all, he's going to lose those touches to Tank in the red zone. But he's way too efficient and he's way too explosive to lose other touches to him. He's going to continue to be utilized in the passing game, even though it won't be a ton, and he will be the main back really anytime outside of the red zone. We're not going to stop drafting Travis Etienne, and don't Tank Bigsby thinking that he's going to be the guy this year. I will take a shot on Nico Collins, though, because CJ Stroud apparently loves him in training camp, has been finding him deep down the field, and Nico Collins is probably going to be the deep threat for this team. He's going to find some one-on-one options, and he's going to beat those one-on-one options quite a bit. Reliable fantasy starter? Probably not. High upside TD play? Some weeks, absolutely. Again, we're getting into round 14, so it's really hard to say that I don't like guys in this particular area. But I am going to highlight that in this area, if you're looking to take a stab at a guy like Cordero Patterson, I would go with a guy like Roschon Johnson instead. And yes, I like Khalil Herbert to keep his job as long as he stays healthy. But taking a shot at Roschon Johnson, especially if Khalil Herbert goes down with an injury, to me is a lot better investment and smarter investment than a guy like Cordero Patterson, who's not going to get touches out of the backfield this year and really is going to be regulated to a wide receiver role that already has 2 other guys that I would rather have there. Like, I would even take a shot at a guy like Darnell Mooney in this round over a guy like Cordero Patterson. All right, you Taysom Hill truthers, I see you being sneaky and putting Taysom Hill inside the 15th round here, grabbing him, hoping that I don't know what this sick obsession is you guys have with Taysom Hill, but can we stop it already? Listen, in this round, give me a guy like Irv Smith Jr. over Taysom Hill every single day of the week. We've got Taysom Hill is not a tight end. I don't know why he even keeps getting the designation of tight end because he doesn't even technically play tight end. The reason that you grab Taysom Hill is because you're like, oh, I hope he scores some rushing touchdowns. But we have Jamal Williams, we have Kendre Miller, and we have Alvin Kamara still. How many rushing attempts and touchdowns do you think this guy is going to get? He doesn't get targets. He's not utilized in the passing game. And they're not going to, hopefully anyway, put him out there at quarterback a whole lot with Derek Carr being there now. So really, Taysom Hill to me is a guy that you just need to forget about. Take a shot on Irv Smith Jr. and his potential upside if he stays healthy over a what if every single week. You made it all the way to round 16. If you're still with me, hit that like button. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. But in round 16, I'm not really sure why Mike Gesicki continues to be drafted over Hunter Henry. When you take a look at their career paths, Mike Gesicki has never really been better than Hunter Henry. This is Mike Gesicki's first year with the Patriots. This is Hunter Henry's second with the Patriots and Mac Jones. Mike Gesicki hasn't looked good in training camp. Hunter Henry continues to be one of Mac Jones' top targets in training camp. Once again, I don't get it. I don't understand. What in the world is happening here? Now, I absolutely understand that Bill O'Brien has made 2 fantasy viable tight ends when he was with New England last time. But I'll take Hunter Henry over Mike Gesicki every single day of the week right now. And he's going after Mike Gesicki. So just go ahead and skip on him. Take Hunter Henry instead. And with everything going on with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards going in the 16th round, is an absolute steal. If I were you, I would definitely add him to your roster at the end of your draft. Headliner Nation, I've already asked you to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new here, but before you leave, make sure you leave a comment down below and let me know who's one of your biggest busts this season and which round is he going in. Let me know down in the comments below. Everybody, peace out, stay safe and healthy. Headliner Nation, make sure you come back and join us again here on the Fantasy Headliners.